let's start with HOL City. They're
Oh,
merging with Astra. So Astra is a small rocket that helps get satellites into orbit. The SPAC deal is supposed to value them at 2.1 billion, and that's 500 million cash proceeds, including a 200 million pipeline. I think this is a really, really good one. Their main focus is improving life on Earth from space. So they think that the access to space is 25 too times expensive, too infrequent, and too slow. Um, when I look at companies, I try to look at the board, the financials. So their founder is Chris Kemp, who is a chief technology officer for NASA. And their previous launches have been really successful. The most previous one was in March, not in March, in February, just gone, which was the Rocket 3.2 vehicle. Did you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I picked up on a similar thing where we had, obviously I saw Chris Kemp, former NASA, and really that sort of link, if they can get government contracts, because a lot of the space sort of industry, a lot of the government contracts are huge. So if he's got already ties with NASA, then they could potentially benefit massively from government contracts. I saw the same thing about, obviously their whole thing is about keeping the costs down. So they want to be able to reduce the cost, I think, by up to 90% of the current cost. Obviously, that's backed by many, because the biggest barrier to entry for any new space company is the cost at the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, with these the 500 million in cash and 200 million pipe investment, then they are going to have that wind flow to really give it a go, to be honest. And their main thing was that I could see that they were saying they could only have a concrete base and they'd be able to use it as a launch pad.
Yeah,
And they've
no,
already identified 10 places where they could launch a rocket from.
yeah, the company can mass produce a portable launch system to launch anywhere in the world for 24 hours. I think they have over 10 launch sites identified. And like you said, with the NASA and US Department of Defense, plus some other government contracts, their revenue is supposed to increase quite dramatically. I think they were saying there's something like 38,000 satellites to be built from 2020 to 2029, which is something, give or take, about a 14 to 15% increase from the total built from the last decade, 2010 to 2019. And that sort of represents about 100 billion in revenue over the next decade. So
Yeah.
you can see the demand in that, along with other companies in the space sector needing satellites to be launched. I think their revenue, they were saying, is they estimate next year 2022 to be about 67 million, and then year 23 256 million, and then I think 780 million in 24, and then it goes over a billion to, I think it's about a billion and a half to 25. So they're, for the next 3 years, their revenue growth is supposed to be over 100% per year, which gives you quite a good indication that the demand is there, with obviously launching. The only issue I had with it is that they can only carry, I think, something on the lines of like 100 kilograms per launch. So it's small satellites, not the big ones. That was my only little concern on it. But due, the financials and everything on that, I think, with the NASA and US, Department of Defense, I think for me, having those contracts are the sort of the major ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had a look and I saw they've got over 50 launches booked already,
Yeah.
which represents $150 million in revenue. So the proof of concept's there. They've got the orders coming in. it will just be a case of, as long as the space industry, which looks like it will kick on the same as the EV sector has done in recent years, as long as that kicks on, they will be a huge benefactor of that, especially if obviously they are reducing the cost. So many more companies want satellites put into space, like obviously you were saying, with the increasing demand over the next decade is going to be huge, really. So I think they will do really well out of it. They seem to be almost like a spaceport company, where they'll just be able to launch almost basically like an airport, basically for spaceships.
They're essentially they're going to be the first publicly traded launch company in the world.
Yeah,
that's what they are. They're a launch company.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see, because obviously you've got different sectors in space which people don't obviously they just assume it's all rockets and so on. But obviously you've got the launch process, the satellites, the actual rockets, along with obviously the space travel, depending on what you're doing. So there's different sectors to it, and obviously for the launch process, these guys are one of the top leading ones, and their intentions is to minimize cost, and they want to get it down by 2025 to daily launches.
Yeah.
I think in the next few months they're going into monthly launches, then into weekly, and then they want to get it down to daily.
Yeah, so I look at that. So by 2022, they want a monthly launch, 2023 a weekly launch, 2024 bi-weekly launch, and then I think daily was 2025.
The attractive thing with that is they can launch anywhere in the world within 24 hours, as long as there's a concrete pad, to the requirements they need. So for me, I think it's quite a positive thing, along with obviously him being technology officer for NASA.
Yeah, I think it's important to have the right connections, especially in the US. I know it's more of an international thing, but I think it's more often than not the people who have the connections within the government and these kinds of institutions, they're the ones who can land the deals. So
yeah, that's it. Well, they've said themselves, they're the most affordable path to space. So, their intentions are there.
Yeah.
And then it's just a case over the few years with the increase of satellites and going up, all signs look to their revenue growth through that and the demand.
Yeah. It's interesting because they made it to space in 4 years of launching the company.
Yeah.
Which is 3 years faster than SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, and Rocket Labs, who've all done similar sorts of things, really. Which is really interesting because I think they've sort of gone a little bit unheard of up till now. I think with obviously ARC's new sort of space ETF, I think people have really sort of sat up and paid attention since then. But I was reading about them, and they were saying basically that they target is global broadband connectivity, Earth observation, national security, next generation GPS and weather, and object monitoring in space. So you've got 5 potential avenues of revenue. So that they're not just purely satellites. They're not just purely anyone who wants to chuck up a satellite. I mean, they can do that, but they've sort of diversified their product range. I think that could really put them in good stead, really, because as long as they can really capitalize on that market and get a foothold, then I think they'll be there to stay, really.
Yeah, I think you'll see a link with other companies. So the satellites that need to be launched up, that go through them, I think they'll follow that with the stocks and in the price. Such as, like we were saying previously, SFTW, which is merging with Black Sky. They need satellites up, and it'd be interesting to see the contracts in that with obviously Astra, because if they have the demand and they have the supply, they're going to be following along very quickly. The only frustration that I have with space is that a lot of their revenue's not there. It's all predicted. So it's very easy to say, if we have 10% of the market, you know, or 5%, but you could say that with anything. So
but we don't know what the size of the market is. Yeah.
no,
and we don't know what it will be.
Bro, you know that. But it's whoever gets the contracts, and that's what makes Astra, you know, attractive stock, because they have the contracts. You know, so for me, I can see this, especially as a SPAC, a nice run up into the merger, and then I could see it maybe dropping down into a support sort of line, and then I think we're going to see sort of up to 2025, sort of a lovely, sort of nice incline up, and finding sort of price depending on the market cap.
Yeah, I wonder whether they're really short term, especially with obviously the SPAC going on. It will be a hype play. We saw when the first marijuana stock was traded on the London Stock Exchange, it wasn't particularly amazing product, but because of the hype behind it, there was huge growth in it, really. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the same here, just because they're meant to be obviously the first publicly traded on Nasdaq. So yeah, I think they're a great buy, to be honest, for a long-term investor.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got to judge it on the hype at the moment, because once the SPAC's gone through, it will drop down. That could be your buy-in. It just depends on the current market price. You should be able to clearly see it really from the chart whenever you're viewing this, really.
I think, especially with such a red market currently, I think you're getting it at a 15% discount of it already being discounted.
Yeah.
After hours finishing on Friday, it's now up just under 14%. I think, you know, if you can get this anything under 14, I think for me, if you can get it under 12, I think that's a definite buy. And like you said, I think you can play it two ways. You can play it short term as a swing trade, and run it up a few days before the merger date, and then sell, and then you buy back in, or you play it as a long-term play, and you know you're probably looking at least, I think 3 to 5 years is reasonable as a long-term play. You know, I can see this being for sure over $20 in the long term, for sure, at a conserved price, that is.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see it sort of far exceed that. Problem is, it's one of those where as long as the industry keeps going up, then the price will be there. It's just one of those where it is such a sort of long-term play that it just depends what you want out of it, and are you prepared, obviously, to wait the time.
Yeah, I think that's the general theme with space, right? You're going to get into any of these investments, anything space related, you're going to be waiting quite a while to see like real market activity.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it's still trial and error, depending on what space sector. But you can see they're progressing very quickly, and you know, like you said with Cathie Woods, you know, in the next decade, this is the future, and this is one of the things we're going to look back on in the next 10 years. And see all these stocks at such a high price, almost like a Tesla play or an Amazon kind of thing play. And these will be the future.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the ARC Space ETF, and if they get FTC approval, I wouldn't be surprised to see them invest in this SPAC. I know Cathie Woods has spoken about it previously, saying obviously about the cost of space, and that's what they need to get down, and that really is why I think it could be such an attractive play to them.
No, I mean, I agree with that completely.